Good morning, everybody. Matt Halpern here, and this is episode 21 of the Chocolate Croissants podcast. Thank you very, very much for tuning in. For those of you who have been with us over the past 21 weeks, it's pretty incredible that you are still here, so thank you very much. We don't take this for granted, and we really appreciate every single one of you who's tuning in to hear what we have to say and what our guests have to say each week. It's pretty amazing what this has turned into, and we're seeing it grow weekly, and we just couldn't be happier. So thank you very much again. As always, I just want to give a quick nod to everyone in our Facebook group. The interaction that's taking place there on a weekly basis and a daily basis is just incredibly inspiring. You guys are helping each other out. You guys are asking good questions. You're engaged with one another, and it's super positive. And I just really, really am happy that we've been able to help create that platform for anyone who wants to take advantage of it. And I encourage everyone to do so. If you have not checked out our Facebook group yet, I encourage you to get on Facebook and search for Chocolate Croissants, or you can go to facebook.com/groups/chocolate croissants. You can jump right into the conversation, ask a question, say hello, chime in on one of the conversations, whatever. Either way, we would just love to have you there to check things out and see what's going on there. One of the other big perks to that is we announce our guests for the coming weeks a week before, and we take questions specifically for the guests there. So if you'd like to be kind of more in the loop about who we're going to have on the podcast and want to ask questions, we take them all seriously, and we make sure that we do our best to get them in each week. At this point, at least, there haven't been an overwhelming amount of questions yet, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Anyway, that being said, for anyone who is listening now who is not subscribed to our podcast, I would love for you to just take a second, if you can, open up your phone, click on the podcast app, whatever it looks like in your phone, and just search for Chocolate Croissants. Once you find us, you'll see a subscribe button. Go ahead and click that. By clicking that, you won't have to think about downloading our episodes each week. They will automatically appear in your podcast app, ready for you to listen to every single Monday morning. We would love to have you on board as a subscriber. I also, as always, want to just take a moment to thank our very, very good friends at Rode Microphones. They have been incredibly supportive of this podcast. And what's really cool is I was actually just in a recording session earlier this week in the UK, and we used some really amazing Rode microphones to capture some drum sounds that are pretty incredible. So, I mean, this company knows what's up when it comes to microphones. So if you're looking for some mics for live recordings, if you're looking for microphones for shooting videos with your phone, if you're looking to podcast and you want a mic that is going to capture your voice in a way that's very professional, then Rode Mic definitely has the products that you will want to check out. And you can do that right now at rodemic.com. That's RODEMIC.com, or you can visit them at their socials and see what they have going on at Rode Mic. All right, on to episode 21. As I mentioned earlier, I am very, very excited about the guest we have this week. He is absolutely one of my biggest heroes. He's a mind-blowing drummer. He is a extremely charismatic and very, very knowledgeable and funny educator. And he's just an all-around A-plus human being. I don't know how else to describe him. He's just a great guy. His name is Greb, and he is an inspiration to pretty much every single person that he encounters. He's wise beyond his years, and quite frankly, I think of him as a guru, for lack of a better word. He's absolutely of the level of someone that I just look up to as sort of seemingly all-knowing and all-powerful, and he's just a great dude. But anyway, his depth is very wide and it's extreme, and I've personally learned so much from him, not only through this conversation, but in all of my encounters with Benny over the years. I first met Benny actually in 2012, and we talk about this in the podcast, at Meinl Cymbals headquarters when we were both performing at the Meinl Drum Festival that summer. And watching him perform in person, watching him teach in person, just completely blew my mind. What was so great about him, and it's still so great about him now, is his humility and his genuine love and care for others and his craft. He doesn't do anything half-ass everything that this guy does is calculated and researched and thorough and done to the nines. And I have the utmost respect for him for those qualities. This episode in particular is filled with huge gold bars of wisdom. And I really would encourage you guys to tune in for the whole duration, because there's some stuff even towards the end that you don't want to miss. I'm going to stop talking now, but I should let you know that we had a very funny and ironic occurrence happen during the intro, right when this kicks in. So pay attention. If you're a drummer, you're sure to laugh about this. And even if you're not a drummer, you will absolutely enjoy this episode. I can goddamn guarantee it. So give it a listen, enjoy a good laugh, and enjoy episode 21 of the Chocolate Croissants podcast with Mr. Benny Greb. I'll do a quick little count off and we'll just clap together. Hopefully with the majority of, well, all of us being musicians and the majority of us being drummers, we can stay on time. So I'm going to go, we'll do a 4 count and then we'll clap on the 5. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we got it.
Perfect. Close.
I don't know whether...
Let's blame it on the technique, okay? Let's blame it on the technology and the delay, and because we would have been so sync. I mean, it would have been amazing.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, so for everyone who's now listening, to count this off, because we're doing this with Benny overseas, we do a little count in and a clap to sync up our audio. And I made a whole point to say that, we're all drummers, we should be able to nail this perfectly. And of course, with the delay of technology, it was like a good second off. So there you go. Those are good drummers for you. Rock and roll. So anyway,
it's always good to start out with like some modesty. You know, I'm in the right mindset now. So.
I mean, you guys can all blame it on me. It's Justin here. I'm a bass player, and I can take all the blame.
Perfect. Okay. Perfect. For once.
Actually, Jordan here, Benny, I know from just spending time with you, you love like picking on bass players.
I do.
Oh, bring the hate.
Hey, Benny, sorry to put you on the spot, but do you have a favorite bass player joke?
Yeah. I mean, did you hear the sad story about the bass player that was so frustrated with his timing that he threw himself behind a train?
No, right. I haven't heard that one, but that's really good. I feel like I could count on you for like a solid new joke. I really do. And that's, it's funny. What I've always loved about you, Benny, and I'm going to go back here to when I actually first met you in person, which was Meinl Drum Festival 2012. What I loved about that whole experience in watching you teach, because I saw your masterclass and I also saw your performance, you worked in humor in this incredible way. And I guess I had always sort of perceived you to be very serious and a little bit like Norbert, who, by the way, as we know, can totally not be serious as well, and he's very funny and a lovable, great guy. But not knowing you guys very well, I just kind of assumed like you were very serious and kind of dry in certain ways. But when I watched you teach, I mean, I was sort of in awe. As a teacher myself, I was just blown away by your ability not only to drive home the message and deliver the information very clearly, but you made me laugh my ass off, and everybody in the room was laughing. So that kind of leads me to where I wanted to start with this. In a way, I wanted to go back to kind of the beginning for you, because you're a force to be reckoned with as a drummer, as a creative, as a overall musician, and as an educator. And you either have had to have read tons of great books, or have had to have great mentors, or simply are just, a genius, for lack of better word. I'm sorry, I'm buttering you up right now, I know. But I think there is a very strong perception of that in the drumming world, and rightfully so. You are at the top of the game, and you're so humble, and you are so funny, and you are so caring about the people you work with, and that's evident in the things that you do. So with that in mind, I just feel like you're extremely well-rounded. And what I haven't ever really talked to you about or seen out there in other forums is really your story and where you come from and how you did really become who you are as far as the professional and the person that you present yourself to be. So I don't know where you want to start. I don't know if that is back when you were a kid or if that's, you know, more so leading up towards like when you really started doing this professionally. But I would love to hear your thoughts on kind of where this all comes from and if you're just a Jedi naturally.
Oh, man. We should end it right here because it can't get any better than this. This is amazing. Thank you. This is awesome. First of all, well, thank you. You're super generous, and but I mean, it's a mixture of a couple of things. I don't know about the genius thing, but the other things that you said, which is. Humor is very important to me. Gathering knowledge is very important to me, and I grew up in a little village called Eichstätten in Bavaria, very close to Munich, and it wasn't a pulsating music city, and like there were concerts all the time, and it was amazing. And my parents were like background singers for James Brown, and I was like, this was the thing, and I just was born into it. But it was really, I usually joke about saying, like, you know, when I started to play the drums, I pretty quickly was the best drummer in the village because I was the only one. And so I was a little bit of I tried to find my own way there. And it was at times maybe a little frustrating and lonely in a sense. And in the other sense, it was just beautiful to have this thing. And to have found something that I loved and that I wanted to spend time on, and to have something that when I came home from school, I knew what the rest of my day is going to be, and it was basically going into the basement and playing the drums, eating some pizza and watching Star Trek, and it was a very happy childhood. And then I later had a couple of bands and also played guitar. And please don't tell anyone, I also practiced bass. But it was this thing of like, oh, music is amazing. My parents valued music. They loved to take me to concerts, but they weren't themselves musicians. But and when it came time to kind of choose like the next step after school, my mom was great at that. Like we looked at my life so far and discovered like, look, if this is what you do all the time anyway, let's try to like move it forward with like studying music or something like that. And regarding the humor thing, I realized that it's the best thing for me as a teacher and as a human being if I take the art form and other people very seriously, but I don't take myself very seriously. And this is the easiest and best way for me to operate, because then it's not so super hard when I have a high quality standard, and I then realize how many times I fail and how stupid I sometimes am and how inconsistent I then find myself. And to watch that with humor and to accept that lovingly, hopefully, and then to keep going is great. And I had times where I lost that a little bit, and it wasn't nice. So I really wanted to find a balance there, and it's a constant struggle still. To get a high quality standard and this moving forward drive, but at the same time being able to step back and say like, you know what, it's all just a game. It's all funny. It's like, I mean, I spent my days hitting things and traveling around the world with that. It's really funny. I mean, let's be honest. It's
yeah. I always tell people that I hit things for a living, you know?
Right.
And it's true. It is, I guess you're right. It is funny, especially when at least for me, when you look at the faces I make, I mean, come on, it's ridiculous.
You have great drum faces. That's true. Yeah.
Oh man, you know it. I wish I could have your drum faces because you always look so damn cool, man.
Come on now.
It's true. It's true. But
the thing is, when you say you hit things for a living, people would believe you and be afraid. When I say I hit things for a living, people would just laugh. So that's I think the difference. So you're fine.
Oh, well, it's very kind of you. It's very kind of you.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Jordan here. I want to follow up on that, Benny, because I'm really glad you brought that up. And to give the listeners some context, you and I, we met, I think it was back in 2013 in the Catskill Mountains in New York. And for 2 years, I got to know you pretty well for about 5 days at a time, helping you manage one of your master sessions, I think in 2013 and 2015. And it was
weird for me, like taking a walk there in the Catskills and then finding this guy naked, like walking around. I was surprised to find you there, but a great friendship evolved. So I'm happy about that.
Most of my friendships start that way. Funny enough.
I know. Oh, you're such a player.
What I really loved about you was what you're talking about, in that you can exist at these two polarities, in that in one respect you are a complete professional and you are very responsible and you're very thorough, but on the other end of it you can equally not take yourself and your work so seriously. And I think it's so important for so many reasons, but it really allows you to not fall too far to one pole and really be a complete human being in your experience. And I mean, I realized quickly on that's why 25 people are traveling from all over the world and spending thousands of dollars to be with you for that week.
Yeah, I mean, like when I teach or when I do, I just had this tour in China, and audiences are a little different there, and there is also this barrier of like translation and stuff. And I really realized, like, I will do anything to keep them engaged and I'll just be happy to totally make a fool out of myself. But then, like with these, I don't know how you call them in English. We call them Schluckimpfung, which is you get some medicine on a piece of sugar, right? And you take it on a spoon, and you just, like, that's how I try to sneak in hopefully deep and valuable information by I give them the sugar, but there's some stuff with it as well, and that they hopefully can take with them. And sometimes it doesn't take much more than like one tip that gets you on a very different path. I mean, that's at least how it was with me. And these moments are different for everyone, but there are these key moments sometimes where something just clicks or something just fits, and then it's like, oh yeah, maybe I should. And then you have to think of it. I mean, that you chose this moment, it speaks more about you than about me, I think. Well,
thanks for that. And real quick, I know Justin and Matt have some follow-ups, but as you explained that, what I realized is that you're like the John Oliver or the Jon Stewart of music education.
Oh, wow. I love those guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but I mean, there's so many people that turn to them for, political news or just news in general, but I think it's because they add that sugar. Yeah.
But they're also like nice, like the secret of those guys is as well. And I think it's the same in education, that portion size is very important. Like our fitness trainer and nutritionist can also, I think, validate. And it's like how much and in which syntax. So we sometimes as educators make the mistake of thinking, look, I will just spray shoot and vomit all my knowledge out, and that should be fine, right? They should be fucking happy with that, hopefully, because I give everything. And it's a little more than that, because the amount and the syntax, so meaning the order in which you structure them and how good it is structured really makes all the difference. And someone like John Oliver is great because he takes on these huge subjects, and what he does is he usually has a very good story. He first explains what it is, he then takes it apart. There is never then 2 minutes without a joke, so you keep engaged, and then but he leads you through those things that basically talk about values and talk about decisions that we as a world or the US as a country has to make. And it then always concludes with something that you can actually maybe do about it, or something that we could now think about. And this is, I think, very important, that if you want to communicate effectively, that the content is, of course, great. The intent has to be great, has to be honest. You want to help people, hopefully. There has to be some education there, some way to keep people involved. And the syntax is important, the order in which you give which information. And we have this in sentences and speaking. It's very important. If you say like Johnny, or the dog bit Johnny, or Johnny bit the dog, it's a very different experience, especially if you're Johnny. And I didn't change the words, but I only changed the order in which those words appear, and it made all the difference. So it is, I think, yeah. And the intent part is this thing of like they won't care what you know if they don't know how much you care. So if you really know what, keep your eyes on the prize, so to speak, and be like, look, what is my role here? Is my role here to jerk off and be like, look how great I am? Or is my role to be like, look, how can I take these 3 days and give you something valuable that you maybe didn't expect, to exceed your expectations, to let you have a good time, and then you're a different drummer when you leave this camp, and a different musician. And I'm not saying that I always can do this with everyone, but this is my aim, and this is something I'm committed to.
And I'm glad you brought that up with John Oliver's format, in that he'll typically end with a call to action, because I definitely experienced it in your education, and I know, all three of us here on the other end of the line, we feel the same way whenever we're working with people. It's, we can provide information, we can provide advice and humor, but it's what can those people do when they're not with us? Right.
And the thing is, if that doesn't occur and it's just information that's well presented, it can sometimes leave you with the feeling like, this guy is great. But it doesn't mean that then I will do something different because of it, or I'm a better drummer because of it. So I've been to many... Look, I'm a professional drum clinic visitor. So I go to these clinics and I did that a lot in my childhood. And sometimes some people played amazingly, played great music, but then didn't know what they were talking about. And sometimes they were great educators. They didn't play that well. They didn't grab me like musically in their performance. And sometimes you had the feeling they don't even want to share that much, or sometimes you had the feeling of, well, they really want to, but it's a little bit messy. So I started to make lists and write down, like, look, what are the elements that I want to master if I want to be effective in that field? So these are always kind of the checkpoints that I want to reach, so to speak.
Benny, Justin here. I just wanted to say that you're so right. The content, the intent, and the syntax are of the utmost importance when you're trying to present something to someone. And no matter what you're teaching, when you try to, just as you were saying, vomit or regurgitate and give people too much, then it almost makes me think of like you go and get a great haircut, and then you have no idea how to actually style it the next day and do the same thing that they gave you. And that's so unfortunate, because you
wait. Are we talking biographically about me now again, or okay?
No, but there is a beard question, so that will definitely come later.
Sorry, go on.
But you're so right. When the subject matter or the content is very confusing and can go over people's heads, just presenting one idea in the best fashion is so much more important than trying to give somebody or a group of people everything. And I think you highlighted that very well.
Yeah, and it's I think really the master discipline, like the holy grail of sharing, and because like Jojo Mayer is, I'm proud to call him a friend, and we have a like contact every once in a while, and I'm always like so inspired, and like my head is always like full, even after short conversations that we had, because he's just yeah, I mean he would, I think, fall into that category of like when we talk about geniuses. But one thing, I mean, he's a great musician. I mean that too. But what I wanted to say is he's a great magician as well, and he told me once that, like, look, there are different approaches to magic. There are these magicians who they show you a trick, and then the coin is somewhere else, and then they look at you and kind of laugh at you, almost like, look how stupid you are. Didn't you see that? And then there's this other approach of like doing magic for people, and with the intent of like, isn't this amazing? Kind of, so and these are, I think, the two choices that we sometimes have. And the other thing that underlines that is that I figured out, if I look like into my value system, it's very important for me to know and to remind myself and to also express that only because in this little field I maybe am at a different point than people who want to have lessons from me or go to a concert, doesn't mean that I'm a better human being, So some artists might sometimes get into that trap of like, look, I'm awesome. and this is where the don't take yourself so seriously part also comes in, which is like, don't. And British people are great at that. They will never put themselves on a too high of a horse, because there is always a joke coming around the corner that totally devastates and destroys you if you get near that behavior. So yeah, I think that's super important, and it's the best environment to be in. And if you're committed to constant learning yourself, you of course find out all the time, like, look, you basically know nothing, and you have to up your game. And if people want to join you in that, amazing. I'm in good company.
Yeah, the more you know, the less you know.
Yeah,
that's a great point for the question that I had for you, Benny, to kind of pick up from, which is growing up in a small village and being the only drummer. Where did you get the education? How did you know which direction you wanted to go as a drummer, and how did you learn? Because I would imagine back then, I mean, I know for a fact back then there wasn't YouTube like there is now, and you didn't have access to the things that we have access to now. So what did you do in that regard?
It was the times of MTV. Yes, I'm that old. It was when MTV actually had music videos, and there was like, in those German TV stations, of course, there was the same crap during the day, like everywhere. But then at night, there sometimes was classical concerts or jazz festivals. So I realized, look, if I stay up late, I can sometimes see stuff that I've never seen before, and that blows my socks off. And so I tried to get that whenever I could. The other aspect was that my brother listened to quite unusual, had a very unusual music taste for back then in Germany. He listened to a lot of funk stuff, a lot of 70s stuff, like James Brown, Tower of Power, like even some disco stuff, and like weird things that really wasn't like, end of the 80s. I mean, it wasn't really the thing, especially in Germany, and a big part was actually like these DCI videos, like the company that later became Hudson Music, that did education videos. When I got hooked with that, I just like ate one after another of those, and of course, then playing with other people. I played with a big band and a punk band at the same time, which was a huge, double life that I had to manage. But it was beautiful, and it all started from there. It was a little bit patchwork ish, because I didn't have lessons. I started when I was 6 years old. I didn't have lessons till I was 12, and in that time, like I didn't have like one figure that kind of gave me like a flow of things. It was like getting things from here and there.
And who was your first teacher, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, the first two teachers were really, well, let me put it that way. The first two teachers were maybe the reason why I later decided to bring some structure into my way of learning and into my way of studying, because it wasn't there.
Right.
Yeah, it was a little bit weird. I didn't really click with both of them that much till I later studied music when I was 17, and then really there was some guy who had incredible sense of teaching and was able to butt heads with me, because at that time I was like, look, I'm the greatest drummer in my village, and and then I realized that I had to change my approach. And but the first two, I often thought, what would have happened if I would have had like an amazing teacher, like very early on. And actually, I think the good thing is, because I played trumpet before I played the drums and piano, and had lessons and stuff, but through that, the drums were always my thing. Like, no one told me what's wrong or right, you know. No one said like, hey, do this and that. I went into the basement and I did my thing. There was no one who had any like tips or rules, and I think it made the drums really my instrument, and I got a very close relationship to it. At least that's how I now kind of rationalize it for myself.
So while we're at this point, Benny, I think there's a couple questions from our Facebook group that are consistent with where we're at. And for those listening, facebook.com/groups/chocolate croissants. One of the cool things about being in our private group, besides connecting with a lot of other people similar to you, is that you get to ask our questions, or ask your questions to our guests like Benny. I think I'll speak on all of us to just apologize in advance for botching any names. But there's two similar questions from Huang from Vietnam and Adam from Sweden.
Awesome.
So the first, what kept you motivated when you were struggling learning drumming early on? And the second, you're such a successful drummer today, but I'd love to hear about those times when you definitely didn't feel like one. Have you ever failed badly or had any major setbacks, and how did you overcome those obstacles?
Right. What kept me motivated was, that it was my thing. It was almost my only thing, in a sense. I don't want this to sound super sad or like dramatic, but it really was. Like, the drums were my friend and my way of expressing myself, and was also my way to be different in school, and I think it was, I that's the thing why I later chose it as a profession, because I never thought too much about that motivation stuff or never had to think too much about it until I then really studied music and made it a profession. And that leads into the second question, which is, when didn't you feel like a professional? Which was when then all the rules and but this is what you have to do, and this is how you become successful, and if you don't do that, then you won't get any gigs, and where this being different then all of a sudden became like a disadvantage almost, or it was presented like that sometimes. And I mean, the times when I felt challenged or not as a good drummer, well, yesterday. I mean, let's start with yesterday. I mean, there are always moments where it really depends on how self-loathing I am at which day. But I at least now have strategies to get out of it very fast, and I now am smarter and know myself better when I get into these moments. First of all, I had them before, and I know how to get out of it. So one thing, for example, I sometimes got myself into these. Gosh, I don't even know where to start when we talk about challenges. One thing that I learned was that, like, frustration or even depression, if we talk about like the next level of it, usually has to have two legs. Like, one leg is blueprint or expectation, and the other one is strategy, or what you do about it, basically. So so as an example, if like frustration or like depression has to be, blueprint, I don't like how it is, or I hate how it is, right? And then strategy, the other leg, I can't change anything about it. That's what really depression is. Like, I hate it and there's no way out, right? So a little milder version of that, which is frustration, is like, no, I thought this would be different, and I don't know what to do. You know, and this is a feeling that comes around very often if you confront yourself with, or you do that on purpose. Even, I mean, we're so crazy. We think about it when we practice, we take things on purpose that we cannot already do, and then say like, look, I'm gonna try it, and then you find out, well, you actually really can't do it, and what to do now? And then is the question, okay, you now feel like a beginner. Does that mean that you're not talented, or that you're stupid, or that you were born in the wrong country, or whatever reasons I came up with back then? Or is it that you're human and you're practicing? And this is a very different perception or a blueprint, right? It's like, look, I'm a human being and I feel like a beginner because I'm a beginner at this thing that I just set out to practice. It makes total sense. It doesn't mean that I'm now bad all of a sudden, or I'm not talented anymore all of a sudden. And guess what? If I'm slower in learning that stuff or becoming better, maybe I had the wrong perception. It means I thought this should be super easy. I should, based from twice the speed. Why not? That's the discrepancy between like your cognitive brain that can say like, I will just make up what I want to do, and then the physical world, the body, who says like, well, wait a second, and your brain is usually faster than your muscle memory is. So this is the point at practicing when we think about like, this is not that hard. I'm so stupid. Why is this so hard? I feel stupid. Which is this difference between, well, I expected it to be easy, and now I realize how it really is. And this is just like a short. And actually, I'm writing a book right now about efficient practicing. And so I did a lot of research in the last 15 years because I was super frustrated and realized I don't need more discipline, or I don't need more talent, or if I need more talent, it doesn't help just wishing for it or being sad that I don't have it. But I need a more disciplined approach, and I need more tools and more knowledge how to get out of these and make the process maybe easier. And the other aspect I want to add, if you don't mind, do we still have time?
Of course.
The other process that I had to figure out when I moved to Hamburg and went into the professional world and practiced a lot, I really got into a bad place, because I thought if I want to become better, I have to search for things that are not good, and I have to search for mistakes. And this kind of spotlight, this permanent like way of directing my thoughts to the what is not good enough, what is not, what is there still to do, and really got me into I became super depressed, because I was like, look, this is not fun at all anymore. And I really had to get out of this and be like, I have, I don't know who said it. I think it was a psychotherapist in history. I don't know. It wasn't Freud, but it was who said, like, if we would talk to our friends like we talk to ourselves, we wouldn't have any. You know, it's like, how nice are you to yourself? And you know, giving yourself some, like, yeah, you know what, try it again, it's not that bad. And so I really became more aware of my mental nutrition and my way of communicating with myself. And that is also another aspect, but we could go into many of these. And as I said, I'm writing a book about it, so my head is in that as well. But yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, Benny, that brings up a perfect point that I struggle with myself, which is there's a lot of things in my life, in professional and personal life, that bring me a bit of anxiety. And I like how you said that you have to sort of learn how to shine a light on the negatives and the weaknesses in order to figure out how to get past it. But at the same time, you can't beat yourself up about it. You have to be nice to yourself, and you have to understand that these things are part of who you are in a way, and that you just can't beat yourself up about it. But you know, I'm curious, for you in that dark time of depression, or even in your personal life when you've gone through things that you've put a lot of energy into and haven't worked out, you know, how do you personally deal with the anxiety that comes from the thoughts you have and the way that you may spiral out in talking to yourself? And maybe you don't do that at this point. Maybe you have really mastered the way that you communicate with yourself in that context. But, you know, I find that I have good days and bad days personally. Certain days I can, if I'm feeling anxious about something, I can talk myself, you know, into a really good place with it. And then there's other days when my mind just seems to race so fast, just incredibly fast, where I can't catch up. And I'm lucky because I never really go into panic mode. You know, it never gets that bad, but it gets
because
bad.
You have super loving dogs. That's why.
That's true. But you know what? You know, it's funny. This past week I was in the UK. I was recording a new drum sample library for my company, Get Good Drums, and there was a ton of. I mean, every day I was in the room tracking, hitting, as you know, if you've ever sampled drums, you know, one cymbal at a time with multiple seconds in between, and one drum at a time.
That's the thing. People always think that it's so much fun, but you basically sit there and do tit, 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 tit.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's there was, you know, when we were doing the cymbals, for example, you know, like I think we did like a classic custom dark crash that was a 20-inch. You know, I would have to hit that at full volume, and in between the next cymbal hit, there was a good 22 to 24 seconds of 60 beat per minute pulse that I had to sit through, and I was doing this all day. And when you're in a room and you have to be quiet and you're isolated and you really can't talk to the people that are tracking you, and you're really focused on, as an example, like getting the hits consistent, you have all this time with yourself. And I would almost compare it to like being in a sensory deprivation tank or something like that. I talked to Justin and Jordan about this earlier this week, and I think one of them brought this up specifically. And I found my mind going into all these places and visiting all of these things that I had not thought of in so long. And at one point in this session, my mind was just going haywire because I was thinking about the work, I was thinking about the session, I was thinking about the physical movements that I had to make, and then I was also thinking about, well, what does this all mean, and where does it stem from, and what are these things in my past that are making me feel this way? So I guess to round this out, you know, for you, do you go through those processes as well? And if so, what is your method, if you have one, to slow down the mind, recenter, and then redirect it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I want to be respectful to people that have actual like clinical depression. I didn't have that, so I just want to be respectful to those people. When I talk about depression, it was just like I was down, I was miserable, but it wasn't like I didn't have any suicidal thoughts or any like that. So sure, I want to be respectful to people who have that, and And the other thing is that you mentioned is, I mean, what you then there experienced. I mean, people pay sometimes a lot of money in meditation retreats to get to that point, and it just shows your efficiency that you use a recording to live through that. So that's great. But I mean, it's the thing is, when I realized how that I'm simply. First of all, I felt miserable, and second of all, I then felt even more miserable because I felt ungrateful, because I was like, look, and this is sometimes a problem with people like in our positions, because you wished to be this like all your life, and then you were on tour, and then you do this, and then you can play the drums, and I mean, this is amazing, you know, and then you feel miserable. What a kind of an asshole are you to feel miserable? You know, it's like, so yeah. It's even that on top. It's like, you should be happy. Again, expectation, right? So, what I then went to, and what's the usual step for people, is to go into positive thinking, and which is another problem, because it's like a Band-Aid, which is, you go into the garden and say like, look, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, and close your eyes. But guess what? There are weeds, and you have to pull them out. And the best way then is to be like, there is what's shitty is always available, but as what's nice is also always available. So I read once about this incredible test that they did with, I mean, it's super simple. They said to a group, look, you have now 2 seconds or 3 seconds or something like that to look at this picture that we show you, and you have to remember and later write down everything on this picture that is red. Are you ready? Are you ready? Go. And they show this picture. It's a picture of Times Square or something, and they take it away. And then people are like, oh, okay, the Coca-Cola commercial, the ambulance truck, red light, and then the da-da-da, and then the KFC, and then the blah, 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 and da-da-da. And after a while, they rationalize, and they say, like, look, there have been a couple of cars, so there must be a red light at the end of this car, and blah, blah, blah. So they then have 14 things maybe written out. And then they ask them, without showing the picture again, now write down everything that you saw that was blue. And people can't do it. They sometimes then rationalize and say, like, look, I think there was a police car with that red light, so that was blue, I think, and then that's it. But then they show the picture again, and you see, like, look, guess what? There is way more blue than red on this picture. Did your eyes see blue? The answer is yes. Did your mind register and save that and realize and feel it? No, because your spotlight was geared towards red, 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 red. So this is how our mind works, and it's super important that it works that way. But then we have to be careful where we point our spotlight at. So an exercise for my students that I give them, I sometimes have these kids that sit there and that really want to, like, already are serious about drumming and serious about music, and some of them are serious about their YouTube channel, whatever it is, and then they're super critical of themselves, and then they play, and afterwards they put their head down, and it's like, what is wrong? It's like, I didn't, the hi-hat wasn't consistent, and the snare drum was, and then you immediately realize, like, okay, here we go. The spotlight is finally geared towards everything that could be wrong. So a rule that I have for myself, and I recommend to students, is record yourself always, and then listen back to it. And at first you have to write down 5 things that are blue, so to speak. 5 things that are good, that you liked about your playing, and you are not allowed, and you have to write it out on paper, right? Because it slows down your mind, it structures your thoughts. It's powerful shit, and we sometimes forget about that stuff. And then after those 5, you're then allowed to write down the things that you can improve. And this is like one simple technique to kind of see what's there and good and bad, and to regain some balance there. Because, and to your answer, you also asked, like, how do you have days like this? Do you have days like this, or have you mastered? I haven't mastered it, definitely. I have these tools now, and I become more efficient and faster in applying them and diagnosing when I need them. But, like, I mean, the word balance is so beautiful, because someone who walks on a tightrope, if you think about, like, how often does he have to make adjustments and correction? How often does he have to balance? And the answer is all the time, constantly. Like, you can't balance something like we hope it would be. Like, you know what? I set this on the right course, and then I just lay back and have a Coke. It's not like that. You have to constantly balance and constantly adjust. That's just how it is. The question is just, how fast are you in making these adjustments, so they then become smaller and easier to do, and do you criticize and kind of talk down on yourself if you have to make adjustments at all, because I should be great at this. Why do I have to make adjustments at all, right? So I think accepting that balancing is a constant thing, and then having things that give you that balance is the key.
That's great. I really can resonate with that. No pun intended. But no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I like that you require your students to focus on the positives first. Shine the spotlight there first, then worry about the places that need true improvement, or the things that they're giving themselves a hard time about. Which, you know, when I teach as well, I find that so many of my recurring students that I've worked with now for years, that keep coming back, the lessons are about 80-20, right? It's 20% about drumming, and it's 80% therapy.
Wow.
And you know, I'm not a therapist. You know, I've been through a lot of things, and I've struggled with these things myself, and I can relate to what they're going through. But I still need my own therapy in that way. And so that's sort of a separate point. But I guess what I was getting at was, you know, do you find that a lot of times when you do your master classes or your clinics, or I don't even know if at this point you even do private instruction, but do you find that a lot of the people that ask you questions, and a lot of the things that you get challenged with from your students, do they tend to be based in this bigger picture world that's not necessarily focused on drumming, but more so kind of what you're talking about? I mean, it is therapy. I mean, what you just said to me in your response is absolutely therapeutic. And I actually really appreciate that, because, you know, we know these things. Like, I know that when I'm having a bad day and I'm having my mind race, and I'm thinking about all these things that are going wrong, I know that there's a lot of good. And I know that I should focus on the good, but it's very, very hard to do that. What I liked about what you said was that it's essentially a strategy. Use the system is the solution kind of idea of, wait a minute, okay, I'm having anxiety right now. I'm overthinking some things. Am I going to let this spiral out of control, or am I going to default to the system? And for what you described, that system seems to be, the first thing you need to do is be grateful. Focus on 5 things that you're grateful of, or 5 things that in the experience you're having that you did really well. And then once you kind of can regain your breath, and you can kind of take a couple deep breaths and recenter, then as you said, focus on the next part, which is, okay, it's like the 2-leg part, right? Now is the strategy. What's wrong, and how am I going to fix this and identify it to move forward? So anyway, my question is, do you find that you end up having these conversations with your students quite often?
Yes, but I mean, first of all, I also, of course, have to say I'm not a therapist, and if there anything serious would come up, I would recommend a professional to deal with that. But it usually doesn't come to that point in terms of that. Well, let me put it this way: you can base your teaching with drums or with anything on a more surface level without a problem. You can say, look, here's right, right, left, left, here's left, left, right, right, do that. Okay, let's now do it faster. And if someone asks you how to do it, which is the lazy cop out, usually you can say like, look, you just have to start slow and then speed it up gradually. Which is, and then leave it at that. So you can do that, or and which is changing, which is basically behavioral change. So what you do is, like you have in hotels, right? You travel. We all travel a lot. Like you can immediately sense the difference between behavioral teaching and change, or authentic kind of like. I give you an example. You go to a hotel and you get your bags down, you're sweaty, you had a long ride, and there's this girl not looking at you and saying like, "Oh, we're so happy to have you at our house," and it's like, you're not. Of course, you're not happy. You hate your job, and you just have to say that, otherwise you get fired. And I feel it. I absolutely feel it. And then there are sometimes restaurants, for example, where you get in and there's this big mama who comes to your place and recommends you some food that she's fucking proud of because it's her thing. It's her dream, and she is proud of the food, and she wants you to enjoy it, and she is really happy that you're at her house. And it comes from a different place. And so you can either spend a lot of time telling people what to do and say, look, turn around, look there, say, we're happy to see you, then smile, and then say that, and then that's a more friendly environment. It always works. Do that. And we do that in drum education a lot. It's like, play this fill in rock, you'll be safe. That's a rock fill. Like, it will sound like rock. It's great. And if you want to play Latin, you just do that, and then people think you're this Latin guy. It's like, you know what? Music is communication too, and it just stinks the same way as it stinks in hotels when someone doesn't mean it and someone doesn't really own it and love it. And the other thing you can do is then change your mindset and change the place where you operate from. And everyone knows this. If for example, and the other thing is, it's much easier. So I do it because I know if I get to that level with people, I can impact them much more than if I tell them a couple of things to do. And I wanna get them into a mind space of valuing music and valuing themselves and understanding things to a level that they then can do all and come up all with the things themselves and do all the right things all of a sudden, because they can if they have the right mindset. And an example would be, let's say you talk to your best friend and you said like, look, can we talk tonight? I feel really shitty. My girlfriend has left me, and like I really need to talk. And he's like, absolutely, buddy. Like at this time when I'm off work, call me. I'm there for you. I will listen. You then call him and you start to say like, look, okay, this is what happened. And oh my God, I don't know what to do. And he's like, yeah, you know what? I don't have time for that now. Boom. And he hangs up. What is your reaction? You probably are pissed off or hurt or confused and like, oh, this asshole, how can he do this to me? He's my best friend and now he's treating me like that. I told him I have something important to tell him and now that, and like, so all this stuff goes on, and then you're like, I will never call him again, he's not my friend anymore, like blah, blah, blah. And then you can go into this whole thing and your whole behavior changes because you have a story of what that is. Now, if you would know that half an hour ago, his mom died, does your whole behavior change or not? Of course it does, right? You will get out of yourself. You will call back and say like, look, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do for you? Is there blah, blah, blah. And you will mean it. If someone would tell you in that other mindset, look, he probably has a good reason, just ask him whether you can do something for him, you would say like, fuck off, what are you talking about? You know? And so if you change your mindset, your behavior changes in wonderful ways and in your unique way. Everyone would do it differently. You would say like, look, buddy, I'm there for you. Someone else would be like, hey, I will get to your house, and whatever you do, it will be your style. And this also answers the question of like, if you keep people in this, do this, do that, do this, there is no chance that they will develop their own style and have their own feel. But if you change mindset and behavior and give them more understanding, they will automatically act from an own authentic place. And I hope I was rambling, that makes any sense.
Yeah, Benny, it's incredible just how the depth of not only your wisdom but your impressions. It's incredible. There was one thing that did stand out that really resonated with me, and then I'll find perhaps a nice way to transition to another question to help you tell your story. But you mentioned about positive self-talk, which is very important, but you used it as the warning.
Sorry, can I interrupt you for 1 second? I'm so sorry. I forgot to say this. For me, it's not about positive self-talk, because also, like Matt, when you said, it's great that you make your students focus on the positive first. It's not always like that. It's not a thing that you have to always do. I sometimes have guys where I think like, you know what? They need a kick in the butt. Mm-hmm. They think they play and it was cringeworthy, and they look very happy, and and you'd be like, look, let's listen to this again. Is there anything that you can find like where we should like kick it up a notch, where you should have a higher standard for yourself, and
right.
and so that can also happen. I'm not saying that that it's one or the other. But that's where it again comes in. It's not always like this or that. It's a balance thing. And if you find yourself criticizing yourself first and always and only, then that is the way to go. To be like, okay, I will focus on that other thing first because I have to train that muscle now. And if you realize, look, I'm a little like I'm pretty happy. I don't know what to do. I don't feel motivated. I think everything is great. Then you have to focus a little bit on like, look, like you have to have a higher standard for yourself, and then what comes up. Sorry, I just wanted to. Sorry, Jordan, go.
I'm glad you brought that up, because to the point that it's not all or nothing or one or the other. Because what I was referencing when you're saying positive self-talk can be used as a Band-Aid and it's not necessarily helpful. And I mean, just an hour ago, I was at my own therapy session, and right now I'm currently transitioning to a different job in a different field that I'm sure I'll talk about in future episodes. But it comes with a lot of responsibility. And the therapist, he helped me realize, like, I should be feeling terror right now because there's a lot of instability in my life and I'm not sure how things will play out, right?
And you pay him money for that. I mean, exactly. It's amazing.
But the idea that if I just do all this positive self-talk to the point where I'm in denial of the real feelings and the truth within me, that, yeah, there are valid fears that I'm carrying within myself. If I don't allow myself to accept that truth, then I'm going to suffer in some way, I feel, personally.
Right.
And I really like that you're able to see that it's not black or white, in that this strategy of positivity isn't always the entire game. And in fact, there's 20 different ways that we can demonstrate or experience positive self-talk or positivity more generally.
Yeah, and I actually think that this positive thinking or only patting on the back way of teaching is the laziest teaching that you can do. Because if you then the guy who's like, great man, awesome man, awesome, it might make you like popular at first but people even deep down that feel that wasn't like super helpful always, and it's amazing to see that if you offer both sides, if you act from a point of respect and say like, look, this is not all there is. This is great. Well done. Now this and this, I think we could work on, and you sometimes make people more happy addressing that, and then having maybe some tools for that, because this is where the real stuff happens. Sometimes it's important. Like that's why we have good friends or family, to sometimes say like, look, you've been acting a little weird lately, and and sometimes that's so important. Or like this typical moment, I'm one of these guys. If someone has something in their beard, I will always tell them right away. I'm not, or something in a piece of some herbs in between their teeth. And they were talking and smiling at you, and you can either like say like, or you can say like, look, you have something there, do this, or
right, the truth.
Yeah, and people are thankful for it, because if you let them run around and at the end of the night they go to the restroom and think like, why has no one told me? Like, you're in a weird position too. So I think as someone, you have to have both sides. But of course, the other way, people think if they offer these corrective kind of, is that even an English word? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, corrective. Good.
Yes.
I was lucky there. I made that just up. Great. If they offer these corrective like statements, that they will always be the bad guy, but that they always would be like, but it's not the same like saying, you have something in between your teeth. Look at you, you stupid man. Didn't you see that yourself? Oh my God. Like, it's not that. You can do that in a respectful way, and in a way where someone knows like, wow, thank you that you care and that you tell me. And yeah, so this is, I think it has to be balanced, and it has to be and that's the mindset again, and the intention again. If you really want to be really helpful, and it's not about you that much, hopefully, then this would be the perfect thing. I'm not saying that I always have I always operate out of that thing where I'm like, can do that and realize that in every second, but it's a thing for me to strive for, and something where I wanted to have a lot of tools in my arsenal to be effective, first of all for myself, and then for other people.
Benny, I think that what you're speaking on of this like balance and this flexibility, and I always think of what Jordan talks about, of having positive self-talk and not being so rigid, kind of going with the flow. It's great that you're referencing this and that you're bringing this up, and I love that all three of us are experiencing things in our lives, and the wisdom that you're sharing is actually resonating with all three of us. I just finished studying a summer session class, and I had a week transition where I started moving, and that's obviously a big undertaking. And then school started again, university started again this week, and it's been a lot on my plate, and trying to find the balance for me to do something that I love, which is training. The ball has kind of been rolling in the wrong direction. And a lot of times I have to talk with clients about, when we fall off track, how to get back on. The longer the duration we're off what we want to be doing, the harder it is to get back on. And so in my head, I've been saying to myself, well, be nice to yourself. Don't be so rigid. And I've been having this positive self-talk when I should probably have a bit more balance on the other side of the coin, which is like, wait a second, like, who are you kidding? You're only fooling yourself if you keep rolling the ball in the wrong direction. And I think what you're speaking on, that this is, it's great to be flexible, and it's great to have that balance in life, and we need that. And so many people need to hear that you need to have balance in your life in all things. But when you're going one way, and a lot of people end up going that way, you have to find a way to then counteract that so that you can at least get back to the center where you have that balance.
Right. And that's the deceiving thing about progress anyway, which is the difference between management and leadership. Like, management is the guy with the machete who goes through the rainforest and does chuck, and makes this way and just goes there, and then he looks back and sees how far he has already come, and he keeps going, and he's sweating, and he keeps going, and then he's so proud of his progress because he's really making progress. It's amazing, and that is management, doing things, being efficient. And then there is leadership, which is the guy on the mountain that looks down and says, like, "Hey, you're going into the wrong direction." It's like it's very important to make progress and stuff and to get into working mode. But it's also important. I mean, in medicine they say the right diagnosis is half the cure. So you have to know first what it is actually that we're dealing with. And I really learned this because, look, maybe I'm not fulfilling many German stereotypes because I don't drink beer, I hate soccer, and then Matt even tells me that I'm funny, so this doesn't fit at all. But one thing that I learned in Germany is that it's very important for us to do things right. Right? We really want to be good at our job, and we want to do things properly and right, and we want pats on the back for that. And so if I want to entertain this stereotype, this is where we get our brownie points for. And I think every one of us sometimes realizes that, of like, oh, I'm doing it right. But I found that my happiness really depends on whether I do the right thing, even if I suck at it, or even if I don't feel good at it, but I at least know that it's the right thing. And then it's easier for me to then be like, okay, well, and that was the thing when I played a lot in cover bands, and I tried to do the best I can. I tried to be more professional. I was miserable. And then I said, it has to be the money. I have to get more money. I have to be more professional. And then I had higher paying cover jobs. And then I said, like, well, I'm frustrated. So it's the music. I only want to do good music. I only want to do jazz now, like in hotels and like ballrooms and stuff. So I only did jazz, and I was miserable. And then I was like, okay, it's the people I play with. I only want to play with the most badass people, jazz, and it's highly paid. And I was miserable. And then I went on tour with my little punk band, and everything went wrong. The bus broke down. We didn't earn any money. We hurt ourselves on stage. Someone got electrocuted, and it was an absolute train wreck. But it felt amazing. It felt like this is the right thing. And it really, when I came home, I then called all these guys who were essential figures in like the cover scene here in Hamburg and all the musicals and stuff that used to book me. And I called them and said, like, look, Felix, and look, blah, 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 whoever it was, I will never play cover music again. If you have any like original stuff that you write, or you know someone who does their own music, or you know someone who wants to work with me, or you can give them my number. But if you ever have any jobs that involves cover music, please don't call me. Don't call me. And they said, like, are you fucking out of your mind? What are you talking about? and I was like, yeah, this is how it is. And to be quite honest, it was a tough half year. I sometimes cooked my noodles twice, and but it felt like the right thing. And this is also so important, I think, as a compass, like in our lives.
Speaking of jobs, I think this is a nice segue. Samuel Pollitt from the Facebook group from Maryland, who I want to publicly thank for helping me out big time with the Beatwell gig last weekend. But he's curious, Benny, did you have any, quote, regular jobs before music? And if so, what sort of life lessons did you learn from them?
None, because I didn't. I really only ever did music. The only exception is delivering some newspapers, like when I was 13 or something. You could do that in a village. You can drive around on your bike and deliver stupid newspapers. And I then found out actually no one cares if you then get tired and you throw half of them away. So that was great. And then the other thing was that when I was turning 17, now this doesn't exist anymore, but I'm actually that old. Back then, you still had to do military service when you became full age, which was 18 in Germany. So, but because I'm a pacifist and a pussy, maybe I don't know, but I said I can't do that, and then you have to do social service instead. So. I had this 1 year of working with disabled people and to basically cook coffee and clean stuff and like get them from A to B, and so this was the most job-like thing I ever did.
Did that feel natural for you?
Quite honestly, I love people and I love those people as well, but this was a year where I said to myself, I realized if I don't focus on what I really want to do in my free time now that I have left, I will always work for someone else. So I really accepted that I had to do this, because actually if you don't do it, the military knocks at your door and gets you there. You know, it's like you have to show up to those jobs. But so I had to do that. So what I did was I did my job as good as necessary, basically, and then had rehearsals and practiced and in the evenings or at night.
So that's really interesting. I didn't even know that, I guess, as a German citizen, that was part of the deal.
Yeah, it was stopped, I think 2 or 3 years after I was through. So I was like, oh man. but yeah, that's how it was back then.
So to keep going with your story, Benny, then where did music really start to pick up? Did you go to university for it? Did you start teaching as well before you started more composing and recording and performing?
I wrote songs even before I studied music. As I said, I played piano and I played trumpet, and I played in orchestras like with trumpet, and I also loved it. But like drums became the most awesome instrument, and remained that for me, and so that's what I focused then on.
Why do you think that is?
That's a good question. Part of the answer, I think, is what I told you, which is I think it was the instrument that I could get my own approach to without anyone interfering and saying this is wrong, this is right. And I think it's a community instrument. I never really wanted to be the front man. I still love, like in music as well, arranging and organizing and like even with moving parts, my band, I pay the guys, I organize everything. I want to provide a platform where great things happen. And this is what the drums really do. They structure a song. They support whatever is going on. They sometimes lead a little bit through those song parts, so I don't know why, but it definitely was. It was a very strong feeling that this is my main instrument. This is what I love most. I am a drummer. So that was like the feeling.
Benny, you spoke earlier. You said that before drums, you played trumpet and piano. I was wondering a few things. At what extent did you study those two instruments? And then, speaking of the new record, Greb 2, there's so many different sounds and textures on that album. And I was wondering, because I try to do what I would normally do, which is go on Wikipedia. It used to be every Tuesday you'd be at the record store and you'd be buying the album so that you could read the liner notes of who did what.
Right.
And I tried to click on it, and no one has updated the information. I feel like I need to somehow get on there and update this for everybody. But
yes, please.
Did you perform everything on the album?
There are two little exceptions, which is a guest singer on 2 tracks, on like 2 vocal solos, so to speak. But the whole album is written, arranged, recorded, and all the voices are sung by me, and all the so it's only vocals and drums. There are no instruments other than the drum set on this album, and I really wanted to create this sound and this density with the voice only. So yeah,
that's so impressive, because I listened to the whole album through this morning, and as I was driving, and I mean, it's crazy to hear that it was vocals and drums, because honestly, in a different era, I feel like, but even in this era as well, just being a musician and loving just a great sense of groove and a great groove in general, I could have listened to you just play the drums on every track, since it is to me, it was very genreless. I could have really just listened to you play, but then there were these great bass lines, and I heard some tracks where I heard, I'm going to go into bass players, your favorite subject. I heard like a Richard Bona, if you know who he is, bass player, kind of sings along with his bass playing. I heard that, and the fact that you played that is fantastic, that you sung that. I heard what sounded like guitar tones and what sounded like playing through like a PVC pipe and making like air percussive tones. And it's funny, because I chatted with Jordan, my brother, beforehand, and I said, "Oh man, he brought up this influence of New Orleans," and to me, I was like, "Oh, I heard these influences of when Pino Palladino and I think it was Philip Sayce and Simon Phillips got together and did this project PSP. I heard Bona, I heard reggae, I heard all these influences, and since Jordan had such a different take on it, I was wondering." What influences you now to make music, and what influenced, what were some of the influences for the new album?
First of all, thank you very much. Very generous of you. There was this album like 12 years ago, which was called Grapefruit, or like now you could call it Grapefruit 1 maybe, but it was my first attempt. It was almost like a successful experiment now in hindsight, which was I was playing in all these bands, and then I wrote these songs for myself. And the way I always wrote songs was to capture ideas. I mean, I have a friend of mine who writes songs as a job as well, and how he does it, he gets he takes 2 or 3 free days and he sits on his desk and he drinks gallons of coffee and just stares at the wall. And at some point he's like, he moves his head like a dog with a dog whistle, and and then writes and starts to write. And that's not how I can write. I have ideas anywhere and in the stupidest situations. And the way I found that I can operate best if I can capture them whenever they come. And then I have another time of the week maybe where I cite all those things and I select them, and then I structure them, and then I realize what was good, what was bad, and then I construct songs out of those. And again, funny enough, usually it starts with a bass line, and then there are then certain parts missing, and then I think about that. And then this has always been my way of songwriting. So like to sing stuff. Back in the day, I was singing, calling myself and sang on my answering machine, which was usually like, I then came home and thought I was incredibly popular and was like, oh God, it's 12 messages. And then it was only me doing, and I was like, oh, stupid, oh, horrible. And
very Seinfeld.
Yeah, right. Bow, chicka, bow, bow.
Mm-hmm.
But then I, now in the iPhone age, I now record that simply on my phone. But back then I then wrote these pieces and almost arranged them a little bit in an a cappella style, because it was just the fastest way to get those ideas down and out of my head. And then there was this moment where I'm like, okay, I'm now going to arrange this for band, and which band should it be? And then I was like, what if I just go like the full mile and keep it like that and make it nice and make it work as a sound? And that's when I then had this a cappella plus drums album, and I loved it, I liked it, but then it was really the start of my, if you would call it, solo career, because like people seemed to like it, and it was my first solo record basically. And even in the other albums I've then written afterwards, and bands then played them, or other musicians played them, this was always my way of writing music. And now 12 years later, I still was feeling this itch of like, oh God, I think I'm now a better writer, I'm a better producer, and maybe also a better drummer, and I really wanna do this again. I wanna do like grapefruit on steroids, and I really want to go like see what I can do with it now, with the knowledge and the tools I have. So sometimes on these tracks there are now 70 voices, like it's almost like choir arrangements sometimes, and yeah, there are all kinds of influences. And if you then want to do an album with a sound like this, where it's almost like a concept album, I then of course look, okay, they can't all come from one place, because the sound is always pretty set. And then I have these two options. The songwriting has to reflect different influences, and also I have to see what I can get out of those sounds. So that's what I tried, and I think that's what you hear.
When you start with the bass line, which is obviously the best, in my head I was saying to myself, well, it could easily have been that you started with some kind of drum arrangement, but I think it would make sense that what would tie the drums, the bridge that then carries into everything else that you're going to do, that obviously your drums, unless you're playing, full on percussion and you have xylophone, marimba, something else that actually can play some notes, then you're going to end up just with, or timpanis, anything, then you're going to end up with, just a groove, which is obviously a great place to start painting the rest of the song. But I think the bass line is great, as it builds the bridge between what everybody else will be doing and then what the other part of the rhythm section is doing. And
right.
And in that, the question is, when you start with the bass line, do you start to hear the rest of the song take shape, or is it something that has to kind of play itself out track by track as you start experimenting, and as you said, recording yourself, listening back, and writing down the blue things of sorts, the 5 good things, let's say, and the 5 bad things of it, and then reworking it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have more in my head than I can then record, and I just try to make it as clear as possible. There are simple things, like I realized I have to count in, because sometimes it doesn't make any sense whatsoever anymore if I listen to it like a month later and I don't know where 1 is. And so it's simple things like that I learned, like how to give myself a better idea of what I actually meant when I was like on the toilet at this restaurant and I had this baseline idea. And but the other thing was, so that is a beautiful thing, but then I still have to get it out somehow. And I realized that fully when I once played one of these recordings to my then girlfriend, and And I was like, "Isn't this amazing? Look, I mean, it's oh God, it's this huge." And there was this little like stupid melody that I sang, and she just looked at me and was like, "Benny, I don't hear what you hear." and I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess I have to do some more work there." And so yeah, I usually have a pretty full idea, but it's not to say that like it's already completely done. Having the ideas is the most fun part of it all, and then sometimes arranging it and really putting it into finished songs sometimes feels like doing your taxes. It's like really work. You have to see, like you said, also like, oh, what is missing, what is good about it, and actually often what has to go. Like there is so much stuff in there now. What is the essence of it, and what do I have to get rid of? And yeah, but it's so gratifying if when then comes to fruition, and then it sounds nice, and I'm so proud of this album.
That's awesome. It's funny. Justin and I did a training session earlier. He was putting lots of weight on a bar and making me push it above my chest. But we were listening to Grapefruit too, and it's actually been in circulation in my car.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, off and on for a couple of weeks, and I'm loving it. And there's two.
Wait! I gotta say right now that you, sir, are responsible for. Like there were 2 songs on this album which are called Grebkestra, and one is called Tricky. And
I knew it.
You were a major influence on the way I wanted to approach these and to play these. So
wow,
over to you.
That's I'm blushing right now.
Matt and Benny. I actually, when I was listening through, there was I think it was Tricky. Yeah, Tricky. I think it was Tricky. It was either that or which I ended up, after Matt left, I went back and referenced it and said, let me listen to it again, because I could hear, and I'm not the most versed in Matt's, the gent metal genre, but the polyrhythms. I went back and listened to that, and I said, wow, that sounds like Loon, like the last track on the newest Periphery album. And I said, wow, I could totally see that being a Periphery style groove. I could hear Matt playing that, and I was like, I wonder if there was some influence, not maybe Matt necessarily, but to hear now, it makes total sense.
That's crazy. Benny, that's crazy. Thank you, but that's crazy.
Thank you.
Well, I read your comment on one of the videos you posted about how, you use similar sounding stacks to the kind of setup that I use, and I love hearing it, because it's not by any means a sound that I feel like I'm responsible for. I just like that sound, and hearing you play it the way you do is why it's like I just can get into it. I'm like carving out this big pocket with my head, and I'm bobbing to it, and I'm loving it. So for the past couple weeks, since I downloaded the record, I've absolutely just been really digging it in the depth. And funny enough, we were debating earlier whether or not there actually was real bass on the record, and you answered the question that it's your voice.
Yeah.
So a couple people in our group did have questions about the composition and how you went about approaching it, and the vocal melodies and so forth, but you've actually already answered those questions. But I wanted to ask you about your attention to detail on the video content that you've been putting out over the past while. I mean, there's when you put out the Art and Science of Groove and did the whole crowdfunding thing for that, I mean, I think what you delivered as a final product was above and beyond what people could have expected. And I'm seeing it now again, even in these videos that Meinl is releasing, specifically like in the Couscous video, where, right in that B section of the song, like right when it, like kind of towards the beginning, when you're playing in the raincoat and you have like all the chairs behind you. I mean, the concepts for these are just, they're super creative. And, even like the Vic Firth video, which I thought that was great, because you utilized the actual functionality of Instagram, to really tell that story. So my question is, how much of that is you versus how much of that is a collaboration with these other companies you're working with, like Mino for releasing these videos, or Vic Firth? How much of it is you? And I think I know the answer, but I'm curious as to sort of your approach to that and how you maybe map that out. Do you typically use like storyboarding, or do you write it? What's your method there?
Well, also, thanks. You're very generous again. Thank you for that. Well, it's very different. I mean, with the language of drumming and the art and science of grooves, it was absolutely ridiculous. Like how, like it was very much like mine and my obsessive, like control freak part. I love movies, and I love just the visual things, and I love this education stuff. I love good sound, and I was like, if I really like spend 7 years of my life coming up with this stuff and thinking about it, then it has to just be great, and it has to be so I'm still happy with it, like in 20 years or 30 years, and it has to be unique, and I want to play with all aspects, because sometimes what we musicians sometimes do is we focus on our little field and then forget about all the other stuff. And I was always amazed that, you know, some clinicians, they focus on their backing tracks, and then they see what comes up as questions. And I'm like, nah, why don't you focus also on the way you talk, what you will say, and how good are you at that, and improve that? And if you do a drum video, why don't you also focus on how that is structured again? How does it look? Are there any better ways you can use to make a point, or to make a joke, or to keep people engaged? So. And also, quite honestly, like with the crowdfunding, it was, and thank you as well again for helping me with that. You did a very wonderful video for me that helped me in the crowdfunding. Is like it was a very successful crowdfunding campaign, and I then was, of course, stupid enough to actually use all the money on the production, and it's just something that I just had to do, and I was able to get a Ghostbuster suit, and I was able to get all these weird things that I just wanted to do, and I hoped would make the thing different and better. So that was very much my obsession, and I did storyboard that, and I did. I was very, and sometimes it's not easy for people who work with me then, to be quite honest, but I try to have a diplomatic and nice way to still communicate, but I have a very strong vision there, and I'm happy that I'm now at a point, it wasn't always that way, but I'm now at a point where I will not sacrifice that anymore. There is, can I go into a hippie-ish story about that?
Please.
I was once invited to India to teach at a university, and they were asking me to teach their drum students, and I was like, well, why would you do that? Because I stole a lot of my educational content from the Indian rhythm system, and now you invite me to teach over there. But they did it anyway, and then I spent 3 weeks at this university, and also taking some tabla lessons and blah, blah, blah. And then we were driving through those villages, and in this bus with no air conditioning, and I was miserable and being like, oh gosh. And then there was on the left side, we had to take a stop because there were a couple of cows going over the street, and I was like, oh my god. And then there was this one coconut like tree, and there was a lot of garbage next to it, and like a sewage thing, and like a toilet that kind of broke, and you could see all the sewage flowing out in the bottom of this coconut tree. And I was like, oh my god, like I don't want to eat that coconut, you know. It's like I don't know what's gonna be in that coconut. And the guy said, no, look, the coconut tree is never sacrificing the quality. If the coconut tree gets less nutrients, less clean water, and less whatever, it will produce no coconut or just one instead of 5, but the coconut that you get will always be great quality. And I, at that moment, thought, I want to be like a coconut tree. This is amazing. You know, it's like whatever shit is going on around me, it will then slow me down, or it will then be a little bit harder, or it will be less, but what comes out will always have that quality standard, and I will not sacrifice that. So this is what I try to do now, and sometimes it's a little hard work, but I can't do it any other way. And I'm actually very grateful that I sometimes hear people that I respect, like you, or also just comments on the internet, or colleagues that then pick up on that and say, like, look, your output is kind of nice. But again, this is not why I do it. It's like I just can look myself in the mirror a little bit better. And to answer your question about the Vic Firth thing, that was also partly, I have to give some credit to Vic Firth, the swipe idea, and when that was super new and hip, they introduced that. But the photo shoot with the tree trunk, and I actually manufactured that tree trunk. I'm a hobby woodworker, and I made this sculpture of this tree where like one stick comes out, because I always found it so silly, the idea, and I was cracking up about it. It's like, imagine if like for every stick you have to like use one whole tree and cut it down smaller and smaller until there is one stick coming out, and then you take the next tree, and then which is not very environmentally friendly. And this is not how Vic Firth does it, but it was a nice thought. So I wanted to have that as a picture.
That's really
Benny,
cool.
I'd like to be a coconut or a coconut tree as well. And
let's all be coconuts. Okay?
And in the States, they've been hating on our coconut oil, but that's like a whole other podcast. Whatever, wrong time, wrong place. But on Greb Fruit 2, again, that features 2 tracks that stuck out for me, mostly because of their titles. 1, mixed greens, and 2, couscous. And I really want, obviously 2 great items in a very healthy, balanced diet. Again, going back to balance, which is super important for all the flexitarians out there that are trying to keep a balance in the diet. But what kind of role does nutrition play in your life?
Oh man, like this, I was thinking about this the whole time we were talking. I was a little bit jealous when Matt said, like, look, he was putting more weight on mine. He was pushing me, and I'm like, shit, I need you in my life. I need someone like you in my life.
I want to be in your life.
Oh, let's be coconut trees together. Let's
yeah,
grow.
I'm gonna make you listen to bass players.
Oh, I'm so happy I found you. No, but it's really like this is something that I am and I'll be quite honest. This is something I'm constantly struggling with. That I'm much better than I was, but like when I was in my 20s, I basically focused so much on my output and on my practicing and on my traveling and like that I really treated my body very poorly, and it was one of those things where I then also realized, look, when we talk about balance, I mean there has to be some balance there too, and I need this to be one wheel in the system that I also need to be a little bit. So I tried to find out about nutrition, and I tried to find out about exercise. Am I as consistent there as I would like to be? No, I'm a single dad, and I have a lot of stuff. I'm not saying this as an excuse, because I pride myself to be good at time management. So I try my best there, and there is a lot of room for improvement. But is it important? Of course it is important, and I really educated myself on that subject as best I could, and yeah, it's this thing that's constantly on my radar, but I'm not always at the level where I want to be. So I have to do the 5 things that I like about it, and then go to the other part.
Yeah, send it to me. I'd like to check it out.
You mean my meal plan for the week?
No. Like the 5 things that are positive about it, and then 5 that are negative, and and see how we can kind of like rectify or come up with a new plan. So you have way more of the positives.
Wait. Is this now an actual offer, or do you just do this for our listeners?
No, this is like 100% an offer, because I think there's something about your accent, and it's lovely, and it's so soothing and great to work with. And I know that unfortunately I missed the episode we had on this amazing acoustic guitar player, Mike Dawes, and I think Matt started the podcast by saying, sink in and get ready to listen to this wonderful whatever bloke or something, or gentleman who his accent alone will make you want to listen. And I could listen to you talk all day. And
what are you talking about? I don't have an accent. I speak perfectly. People always make fun of me.
That's amazing. Well,
Benny, speaking of Joseph from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, his question was, how does one achieve such a soothing voice tone?
Oh, my God. Well, you have to grow up in Germany and read a lot of books and don't sleep that much. That's very important.
Well said. So we want to keep going with these Facebook questions, Benny, because we do have a few more. Okay. And then, so these two kind of blend together. The first is from Wilson Adams from Nashville, Tennessee. And then a similar one from Anthony in East Hampton, New York. So Wilson starts out, what's one of the most commonly overlooked things that you see in people learning their instrument? And then as a follow-up, what's one of the most overlooked things that you see in artists trying to build their brand or following and presence?
Wow. As I said, I try to really look at case by case. That's why I find it difficult, because if I now say one thing and someone would be listening like attentively, it might exactly be the opposite for that guy. But one thing that I realized is that, and maybe drummers that are listening, when you have this weird feeling in your neck when I now say it, you know that it is your subject. It is time and sound. I'm amazed how sometimes even professional colleagues can't or don't want to, or are a little bit uncomfortable like tuning their drums, and are not like super comfortable with their instrument. And the other thing is sound. So we try to focus so much on like what we play, that how it comes across is sometimes something that we don't focus on that much. And if we talk about musicians in general, it's usually always the stuff that we think is not our business. So for drummers, we think rhythm and time is our business, and then melody and form and arrangement and dynamics is not our business. Guitarists or saxophonists or like melody players mainly, they think they have to practice scales, and they have to have a bigger range, and singers, it's like they have like to have a good tone and to be fluent in scales and different pentatonics, blah blah blah, but they then forget about having an incredible timing.